showed us all had all he needed. Could park it anywhere, free as a bird. But when he flew, he found out fast that the great outdoors is a barbed wire fence. I'm not staying here when the ship goes south, and the ship seems to be already here. I've a backpack with all my needs. Trouble is, when I dream, all I find is that the great outdoors is a barbed wire fence. I'm sure my grandfather left freedom here, unless my eyes were open when I was born. But this world has left me blind. Is that right, Mother? Am I blind? I'm sure I smelled freedom once in the backwood forests of your eyes. Had you said, hide with me, or how else will we ever live free? There's an exodus heading out of town. Their faces are up, but their eyes are down. There's a sun that seems to be shining upside down. And around and around, upside down, and around and around, upside down, and around and around, until we reach the outskirts of town, where we find time and time again that the great outdoors is a barbed wire fence.
Morning, Jonathan. We're streaming from the middle of the Nullarbor. You're in the backyard of somewhere in Sydney, I think.
The very beautiful south coast of New South Wales I'm on, yes.
Oh, beautiful.
It's amazing what the technology can do. So welcome everyone to the Sunday morning series on Cafe Locked Out, where the show that brings you all sorts of things, thinkers, commentators, the controversial,
That's right.
the passionate. Today we're joined by Daniel Wild, the Deputy Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs. He's one of Australia's leading independent think tanks. It's dedicated to free markets, limited government and individual freedoms. Daniel has been with the IPA for 6 years, rising to the research fellow before taking on his current leadership position, where he oversees the delivery of key research programs. He's become a regular on Sky News, ABC, Radio, 2GB and other major outlets, as well as newspapers like The Australian and The Spectator. Right now, he's at the forefront of two of the most heated discussions in Australia today: the impacts of record-level mass immigration on housing, living costs, infrastructure and social cohesion, and the sweeping new hate speech laws that many fear are eroding free speech and silencing legitimate debate. So it's wonderful to have Daniel on. He's one of the most informed people on these incredibly controversial subjects. Michael's been travelling around the country, so he sees the impacts of it on ground, skyrocketing rents, the growing sense that you can't openly question government decisions, all of this. So welcome, very welcome, Daniel Wild, to Cafe Lockdown. Very nice to see you.
Well, thanks, John and Michael.
Yeah.
Thank you. Looking forward to the chat.
Well, can I tell you something straight up? I was in a little town called Cowell. I was in an op shop, and there's an old lady in there, and you just ask people what they think of the current state of the country and hate speech laws. You just ask them. And she said she's run pubs most of her life and worked with all different nationalities. And she said she's never been racist in her life until now. And this current government is making her racist because Indians are buying up her entire town. And she feels that she's just been marginalized and can't say anything as a white person. And that's how she felt, you know. And the next town we got to, there was a young woman running a cafe. The cafe was really busy. And I asked her how she was, what problems she was facing. And she said the cost of living is making it so difficult with all the government regulations that even though she's busy, she earns less than the casual staff she employs. So she's not making any money. And on the same street, there was an IGA that was full of people. Basically, most people are pretty poor in there. And there was a tray of Brussels sprouts, 12 Brussels sprouts for $9. And I thought, now that's the cost of living. Because there was no one in that store that was going to spend $9 for 12 Brussels sprouts. Cheaper to buy marijuana, mate. Yeah. I'm sorry, but it is. And everyone's joking about it in the store. There's another joke we heard that all the roadkill is disappearing because it's cheaper meat. This is what you're hearing on the road as you're going around talking to people. Because I was watching your interviews this morning with Sky News about the disconnect between the government and the people. So it's really interesting being on the road talking to people.
So, Daniel, can you give us a background on what has actually happened for, say, people listening from overseas? What has happened with mass migration in Australia? Give us the whole cold hard stats, basically.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, look, basically the last few years, essentially since COVID, since the lockdowns ended and the borders opened up, there's been a massive surge of the number of people coming into the country. For historical context, from about basically 1949 until 2007, it was about 80,000 per year was the net overseas migration figure on average. So some years were higher, some years were lower, but it was around 80,000 per year. In the first full year of this current federal government, it was over 500,000. Right, so that's, and then it's gone to, they're down to about 300,000 per year net overseas migration. But that, there's still more people coming in. It's like when they say the inflation rate has gone from 4% to 3%, prices are still going up. It's just that they're going up at less of a rate. So, yes, the government will say that migration is going down, but the numbers are still going up just at a slower rate. And, every single year of this government, it has been higher than any year prior to when this government came in. Okay, so these are numbers that we've never seen before in our nation's history. And when we look at sort of the, I guess, as a share of the population, what's happening, about 32% of Australians are born overseas. 32%. Now,
which is a staggering number.
Yeah, and that's the highest number. It is, and it's the highest of any comparable nation. New Zealand is about 30. It's just behind us. But when you look at the United States and the United Kingdom, they're at about 15 and 20%, respectively. So much lower numbers. Canada is also increasing a bit, but Canada has started to actually really taper back, which is interesting what's happening. They're really starting to come back on immigration. Our numbers are still very high. So, yeah, look, in a nutshell, we've just had a massive surge in the numbers, and it's led to economic problems and social problems too.
What's the reason behind it? What the government wouldn't do something that would lose them power, and so they're going against the will of the people, because that's the big talk all on every single town we go to. So why are they doing it? What are they trying to achieve?
Yeah, it's a good point, and you are right. It's one of these real hot button issues because there's a massive disconnect between the political class and as you say, regular people. And, regular people experience it in different ways. For some people, it might be the cost of their rent. For other people, it might be the rapidly changing nature of their suburbs or communities. For others, it might be a sense of unease at the pace of change. But it affects pretty much every Australian in some way. In terms of why are they doing it, well, there's a couple of reasons. One is if you bring more people into an economy, it makes the economy bigger because you've got more people spending more money. So the headline GDP figure is going to be higher than what it otherwise would be. So it makes it sound good, So basically they bring it in because you'll get more economic growth. The thing that matters, though, to people is not so much the headline economic figure, which is pretty abstract. It's the per capita figure. So what is the slice of the pie that everybody's getting? And we know that that slice of the pie is actually getting smaller. So there's more people coming in, but sure, there's a lot of people coming in that do have skills and do make a very good contribution. But there's a lot of people that are very low skilled, and a lot of the driving force are international students, which is a really big part of it. The foreign student intake is the one of the single biggest components of the migration program. And of course, it's the universities that are driving this. They want to bring in more international students because they get a lot of money out of it. And there's kind of a quid pro quo because foreign students don't access HECS, right? So there's no real direct cost to the government. If you're a domestic student, you have HECS, which is, the government-supported scheme. So you're basically borrowing off the taxpayer. And yes, you pay it back in the future, but that's, a long way down the road and it's at a discounted rate. So there is a financial cost to the government. So if they bring in the foreign students, they don't have the direct financial cost, and the universities like it because they're getting a lot of money coming in the door. So there's that. And then one other factor is, corporations have always really liked migration, and there are some genuine reasons for it. We do have skill shortages in certain areas. If you go talk to a farmer that's, fruit picking, it's very hard to find. They claim it's hard to find Australians that will do the jobs, and I believe them as far as it goes. Hospitality and aged care are other sectors that need workers. So there are genuine reasons to bring in workers. But at the same time, we know that bringing in more people is going to suppress wages. It's going to put downward pressure on wages because you've got more competition for jobs. And it means that businesses don't need to train Australians for the jobs as well. So, I accept that there might be a skill shortage. And yes, in the short term, you may need to bring people over. I absolutely accept that. But I also think that businesses have an obligation to help train Australians to say, well, we need more fruit pickers, we need more aged care workers, we need more whatever it is. And they'll help train Australians so that maybe in 3 or 5 years' time, that skill shortage can be plugged by Australian workers. So at a headline level, I think that those are some of the factors driving this.
When you say business has a responsibility, when you talk to these small business owners, like there's a boat manufacturer in Mildura who's getting ready to leave. He says it's impossible to make money here. Surely before you tell business owners, or the government tells business owners what the responsibilities are, the government should get out of the way that the business can actually make a profit first, that it has actually money to spend on these responsibilities. I know there's a guy who runs Drifter, and they have outlets all over the West Coast or East Coast, and he's really struggling. He's really struggling. He says it's literally impossible to make money in this country. He said everyone he knows is broke, but then at the same time, we're meeting people who are saying the Indians, the new migrants, I don't know if the new migrants or Indians, are walking down these streets of these towns offering people cash, and they're offering people far more than the business is worth, and that's how they're buying them so quickly. And then you're wondering the question, because we're trying to find out why would any business person ever offer more money for a failing business than it's worth? It doesn't make economic sense, and they're not idiots. So these are seeing what were happening on the road now, all the way down from Port Macquarie to now on the Nullarbor and all through South Australia. This is the biggest topic everyone's talking about. It's not actually the levels of mass migration. It's that we see a town like Grafton where there's homeless everywhere and they're all white people, and the town's been bought up. And you think, well, how's that going to rebalance into equality where suddenly everything's the same? How do these people stop becoming second-class citizens in their own country?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of your first point about the businesses, I agree that the amount of time that a small business owner spends, doing paperwork and red tape and so forth is insane. When I was referencing businesses' responsibility, I've also had in mind some of the bigger businesses that are bringing in, or who have an incentive to bring in workers from overseas, perhaps overlooking domestic workers as well. I certainly share your perspective on, businesses on a main street of a suburb that are, and you just look at like electricity bills, simple things like this. People say, why am I paying $6.50 for a coffee, or, $12 or $15 for a pint? I don't think it's because you're getting fleeced by the business owner. I think it's because all their costs are going up, and either they have to pass it on or they shut down. That's the proposition a lot of them are facing.
Well, that's what this woman said in this little cafe. She said, the only way I can make profit is to charge $7 for a cup of coffee. Yeah. And this is a tiny little town in the middle of the peninsula. She says, my customers won't pay that. So if I go to make a profit, I'll go broke. And if I don't put the profit on, I'll go broke. And the business was busy, but she still can't make money from it.
Yeah.
So in terms of the standard of living of Australians, which has been dropping for some years now, as I understand it, at first it was like 1% a year or something. How is it running? What is happening? Are we reaching a tipping point where people feel it's no longer worthwhile working? They might as well go on the dole. The grief of it is just too much, an hour in the traffic to work, a nightmare job with a nightmare boss, another hour back, the petrol costs, the tollway costs in Sydney particularly. What's happening with our standard of living, both in the cities and across the regions?
Yeah, so if we look at the headline economy, it's not going well. I think under this government, I'm not just blaming this government, by the way, but it's just a reference point, which is they've had 13 full quarters in power, and 10 of those 13 we've seen per capita growth go backwards. And that's the most protracted decline that we've ever seen since records, or at least since digitised records began in the 1970s. So, again, this comes back to the only lever they have to pull is bring more people into the economy, makes the economy bigger, but the per capita share is actually going backwards for some of the reasons I mentioned. In terms of the lived experience of Australians, it's very different depending on who you are, where you're from, and what your current life situation is. For a decent chunk of people, life's going very well. They might have a good job. They might be mid-career professionals. They maybe got a mortgage 10 years ago. They've paid half of it down. So they're probably going, not too bad overall. There's, of course, people that, are in the political class and this sort of protected enclave with very safe jobs. They're probably doing okay. You've sort of got this, working poor that has started to develop, which are, people that are very embedded in the private economy. They are exposed to the vagaries of life that they have very little control over. Like you mentioned, Michael, that lady at the cafe has to charge $7 or $7.50 for a coffee. She can't do anything about the price of milk or the price of coffee beans or the price of, what she has to pay her workers. She just has to basically deal with it and do what she can. It's that cohort that is really struggling. And I think that the point you make, John, about not just the money, but our lives, how are our lives going? And certainly, I was a candidate for the Liberal Party at the federal election. I ran for an outer suburban seat in the northern suburbs of Adelaide. And certainly that experience you referenced, John, of driving an hour into town and an hour back, when you've got 2 or 3 kids and trying to arrange your affairs. And because the price of everything's so high, both mum and dad have to work. It means that your actual life is actually, the quality of your life has degraded as a result of those changes that we've seen. Partly that's the population growth, which adds to the infrastructure and the traffic congestion and so forth. But even things like getting into a swimming class, getting an aged care facility for your parents that's nearby where you live. These, practical things that regular middle class working people that have a pay-as-you-go salary have to deal with is getting tougher and tougher. And of course, you got to pay tax as well. You can't get out of the system if you're on a pay-as-you-go income, a salaried income, which a lot of them are. So it's really that middle class, which is the backbone of our economy, the backbone of our society, that is getting lent on heavier and heavier. And so, a lot of people are certainly struggling that are in that category.
Unfairly or not, a lot of this is leading to enormous resentment towards newcomers to Australia. We were blitzed, literally blitzed, with billions of dollars worth of multicultural propaganda over the decades, and now there's all talk about the failure of multiculturalism, which is now out there as a. You see it in the commentariat and certainly on the street that this has been a failure, and we're being swamped, and people just generally feel overwhelmed. So how much of this is bleeding into the politics of the country at this point in time? Enormously, I would have thought.
Yeah, I think it's the single biggest factor. I mean, if you want to understand One Nation, there's a few factors there, which is loss of trust in the Liberal Party. But the single biggest policy factor is immigration. I think if you were to survey, I think One Nation's gone from 6% at the last election to something about 26, 27 now. So if you were to survey though that 20% that's moved over, I'd be willing to bet that immigration is a 1 or 2 issue for them, and that's what's driving politics in this country. We've seen that in the UK. The vote for Brexit was not just about immigration. But immigration was a big part of why people voted for Brexit. It was a big part of why they voted for Boris Johnson, who let them down. Boris got in on the back of Labor voters that never would have voted Tory in their entire life. They didn't really vote Tory. They voted for Boris because they said Boris is going to get it done. He did get Brexit done, but he basically stuffed everything else up. And also in the US. I mean, again, not the only Trump winning in 2016. It wasn't just immigration, but a very big factor. Continental Europe. I mean, we're not immune to this, right? Australia is different. We have a different culture. We have a compulsory preferential voting system, so it's different. One Nation will not be like Reform. It'll have influence, but it will take a different form. Obviously, in the US, it's a direct presidential system, which is very different. But in terms of the fundamental the currents that are driving the political system, we're not immune to any of these forces that have happened all across the world. So, yeah, I mean, I just think immigration is... so obviously, if you ask people, cost of living is number one, right? But aside from cost of living, immigration is right up there for a significant cohort of the population.
It's leading to huge resentment. Sorry, Michael.
I was just saying, with the cost of living, the other thing I'm seeing is that we've had recessions. I'm almost 60. We've had recessions all my life. They come and go. Times are bad, times are good. Often on the street, you don't notice. But now people are suspecting that this isn't just an anomaly. We're not just suddenly having a bad cost of living and in a few months it'll go back to normal. Most people are feeling that we're going into really harsh economic times and wondering how they're going to survive it. Is that the sense in Canberra as well?
Well, I don't think the politicians get it. If that's what you're asking, I don't think they understand that. I mean, some of them do. There's some, to be honest, there are some pretty switched on people in politics. I have to say, it's just that because of our political system, they don't really speak out in public as much as I would like them to. So some of them definitely get these issues we're talking about for sure. But yeah, I mean, as a cohort, the political class are a bit insulated from these issues. But look, I agree with you. I do think people are getting a sense of, well, how do we get out of this? And don't forget, in the early 90s, when we had the recession, people still had confidence in leadership. They still thought, well, Paul Keating can get us out of it. And indeed, they voted for Paul Keating in 93, even though he oversaw the recession. And then we had Howard. I'm not saying he was perfect, but what I'm saying is people sort of trusted the leadership to understand the economy and to fix things. So the problem you have now is, I think a lot of the issues we face are fixable, but I just don't know whether the political class understands the issues enough. And I certainly have the view that by and large, the public don't believe that the current crop of political leaders are going to be able to address the economic problems that we face in the short term, which is what I think is driving some of that concern that you reference.
You certainly see doubt that Albanese, the Prime Minister, could even run a corner store. There's that sort of comment out in the cafes and beer gardens of Australia. He couldn't run a corner store, certainly not in this economy. So there's the view out there that Indians, who are the primary cohort, are voting 85% Labor that is left. So does that gel with what you know? and is that the motive behind Labor bringing in so many people from the subcontinent?
Yeah, I've seen that figure. I don't know how true that is. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if new migrants are more likely to vote Labor than Liberal at the moment. But then again, everybody's more likely to vote Labor than Liberal, right, at the moment. The Liberals are not doing well. And this is a point I make, right? They say, Liberals have a problem with attracting female voters. They have a problem with attracting younger voters. They have a problem with all voters at the moment. So I don't, you've sort of got to take that into account, that the Liberal Party is not doing well at the moment at all. And so the natural default for a lot of people is to vote Labor or preference Labor, at least. I mean, Labor's not doing well either. They're in the low 30s primary as well. So, but in terms of preferencing, yeah, they're going to preference Labor like most voters at the moment. So I think you've just got to remember that. Look, I think if you talk about the politics of migration, well, Tony Burke himself, when he was immigration minister, was rocking up to the citizenship ceremonies all around the country before the last election. So it would be difficult not to see that there's a component of politics that's involved. Now, I'm not saying that's the only factor, but that is a factor. I think the other thing for the centre right of politics is I just don't think, and I'll say we because I include myself in this category, I just don't think we've done a very good job at communicating with new migrants who come to Australia. For example, my experience is the overwhelming majority love the country. They love the flag. They love Australia Day. They voted no to the voice to Parliament, right? Because a lot of them came from parts of the world where you had entrenched racial division and they were second-class citizens. And they were promised to live in Australia where we're equal and everybody gets a go provided we treat each other fairly and do the right thing. That's basically what Australia is. So they're actually I don't know if you want to call that conservative values, but their values are very mainstream values when it comes to culture and social issues. So I just don't think that we've done a lot at communicating what we actually believe on the centre right. Like we sort of try to contort, like politicians will try to contort themselves, into pretending that they're a part of a certain migrant community. But what you really need to do is you need to communicate what you believe, not try to augment it according to the people you're talking to at the time, right? Because people can tell when you're being fake. So in my opinion,
one of the things that's driving resentment is the perception that new migrants, and particularly Indian migrants, are getting something that the other people aren't. So Michael's been through all these small towns and he's put up and the general thought is that they're getting business grants, scholarships, and so on and so forth, that they're getting all these enticements to come here and all these government benefits that aren't available to Joe Bloggs next door. So could you just detail what exact enticements the government are using to encourage Indians to come here?
Yeah, look, I don't know a lot about that. Some of those specific examples there for particular cohorts coming. Well, as a general observation, what I would make is if you take a step back, you mentioned multiculturalism earlier. So there is an ideology or a driving force within the government, and not just this government, but it's been a part of government policy for a long time now, which is, to have programs which maybe dissuade new arrivals from fully integrating into our society. And so that's one of the driving forces between this sort of balkanization of our country, where, we don't have the same integration that we once had. Now, integration has always taken a long time. I think a lot of us, a lot of people might look back to the post-World War II era, where we did bring in a lot of people by the standards of that time in terms of the size of our population. But I think overall it probably worked pretty good. But it took a generation, right, for a lot of people to become comfortable with being Australians. But the key thing to remember is back in 1949, Arthur Calwell, who was the Labor immigration minister, he used the term New Australians, right, to describe migrants that were coming. Now, why is that an important term? Well, for one, it encourages new migrants to think of themselves as Australians, but just as important, it encourages Australians to see them as their equal, right, as we're all Australians. They're new Australians, so we both have, this sort of responsibility to see each other as equals as Australians. That kind of language is not used anymore. It's all draped in the idea of multiculturalism. So whatever the specific programs are, and I'm not expert in the individual programs, but there is always this sort of idea of separatism that can sit underneath it, which I think is one of the problems that we have.
Can I just put in. Another thing is, this is not political, but if we're going into hard economic times, we've come off 40 years of abundance. And what that abundance has done is made Australians individualists. Go out, here, son, go out and lead your own life. Go get to university, go have a kid, wish you the best. People from the subcontinent come from a harder economic environment. They work together as families. So they come in, they buy a business, they buy it in a conglomerate. They hire people with visas coming in. They pay them $10 an hour. This is known, $10 an hour. We've been speaking to people about this too. They pay them $10 an hour. If the person complains, well, they can F off back to their country. They'll end their visa. And to me, this is economic rationalism. They're actually doing an economic model that's going to allow them to survive in these hard economic times, where Australians operating by themselves, adhering to all the government regulations, are going to go the way of the dodo. And so I'm wondering actually if we can learn, if this is actually a time for our culture to learn in hard economic times. It's better to reestablish family groups, come together and actually have a more binding society, because that's the only way we're going to survive. I see it also in the feral animals. You come from Broken Hill to Mildura, there's millions of goats, because the Arabs aren't buying the goats at the moment. So there's just millions of feral goats. And you don't see many roos, but the only place you see roos are dead on the side of the road, because they still haven't figured out how to cross the road in front of trucks. Well, you never see a dead goat. So even the roos could actually go to the goats. How do you cross this truck? How do you cross this road thing? Because we're doing the staring contest, and it's not working. But what I'm saying is, it actually be a time to learn, because this is what we're finding on it. And the Indians seem to be, and this will be controversial, they seem to be getting left alone by the health officials and other government policies. And the word on the street is that because they're going to be voting Labor. So Labor doesn't have an incentive to crack down on these shoddy business things. A perfect example was a guy the other day in the caravan park, and he's just sold his garage in Darwin. He put it up for sale. The next day, a new migrant called him, offered him far more than the business was worth. And he said, he didn't want to sell. He's a Pauline Hanson supporter. But he said, I'll come up and see him. So he chartered a jet to fly to Darwin from Sydney, came in. They had all the books ready for them. He didn't look at any of the books. He said, let's have a cup of tea. He paid him half cash and of course, half normally, far more than the business is worth. Then he told him he's got 59 garages he's bought in the last couple of years. And the ones in the remote Aboriginal communities make him the most profit. And so they're bragging all about the thing. And what they're saying is that they're getting cheap loans from Indian banks. And this is really happening now. It's like an economic invasion that you can't say anything about, because everyone's terrified of these hate speech laws. But at the same time, they can visually see it. And that's the biggest thing in every single town. This is all anyone's talking about. And I don't see it anywhere talked in the media or politics or anything. But this is what's happening now, So, in a way, that wasn't my question. It's what I'm seeing. I just want to get back to something on your website that, it's here, to maintain and enhance the Australian way of life for the next generation. So my question is, after these 6 years of COVID, what is the Australian way of life now?
Yeah, that's a good question about that. And I think, I was living in Melbourne for most of the COVID period, and saw, you did too, yeah. So I was at the Shrine.
I got shot, mate.
Right. Okay. Saw it, firsthand. So, yeah, I think that was certainly a moment where it was a period where some of us would start to question what has happened to some of our values as a country and as a nation. And I think the way in which governments, particularly in Victoria, but everywhere, were able to so swiftly do what they did, basically showed us we don't really have meaningful rights.
Yeah.
If your business was, as an example, if your business was shut down, or you couldn't open your doors, there was actually nothing you could do about it. You can argue, well, you could go to court and so forth, and yes, you can, but who has the time and money to do that? So really, there was no procedural fairness in any of it. It just overrid everything. And, there'll be people who say, well, government has to have that ability to do that in an emergency. Perhaps in certain, if you're under attack from a foreign adversary, sure, I would probably agree with that. But this was nothing like that, nowhere near. And so just the sheer power that governments have was eye-opening. And I think also that a lot of people went along with it. Certainly the lockdowns and everything, the mandates. So certainly in terms of the extent to which people will stand up for their freedoms when they're threatened, that got called into question. One thing I will say, though, is we did get out of it. That's one of the things to remember. As bad as it was, it actually could have been a lot worse. And I know it's cold comfort for those that were suffering in lockdowns, but we did ultimately get out of it. I was concerned at one point that things like the vaccine mandates would be extended into other parts of society even after COVID. That hasn't happened. And a lot of the concerns I had about what they've done in China, where they've taken a lot of the surveillance powers and continue them, that hasn't happened here. Now, I'm not saying there aren't issues with privacy and so forth, but we did actually get out of it. I know that they ended the lockdowns not because of any other reason, but that people were just taking to the streets, and there was going to be civil unrest in Melbourne. They knew that, and that's why they stopped the lockdowns.
I took this in Melbourne. That's a photo I took. I don't know if you can see it.
I can.
And that's I actually went to court because I was arrested that day. And the magistrate, when he saw that, went, "This is King Street." And he let me off. He held the picture up in his hand. He couldn't believe it. He actually showed the prosecutor. He said, "That's King Street. It's an astonishing photograph." And these were others. This was another big one that they've tried to take down. But this to here is like the old Australia here, who we thought we were before COVID. We have the right to protest. And this was basically the government saying, no, you don't do what we say, we're going to brutalise you. And they did. And so when you say the Australian way of life, there's an art form happening now, memes. This meme was posted. I think this was the hate speech laws. This is so powerful. Look at that. And so this is moving on now to the hate speech laws while we have you here. What's the real reason they're pushing these things through? Because Australians don't need hate speech laws. We're very good when we're allowed to debate things. Like Azaria Chamberlain is the perfect example. Everyone was debating it, but no one lost their job. No one got cancelled. We just had, a passionate difference of opinions of whether the mother or the dingo did it. But now people are too terrified to talk. They're defaulting to silence,
Yeah, well, I certainly agree. There's a lot of self-censorship going on. No doubt about that. The interesting thing about the hate speech laws is there was a lot of pushback from the community on them. And that hasn't always been the case with freedom of speech issues. I don't know how aware you are of Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act, but that's a fairly infamous provision that was used against commentators like Andrew Bolt as an example. And I think people, while they may be uncomfortable with it, didn't see it as affecting them. They sort of saw it as this journalistic class issue, and that they have a support, like they have a company behind them to help. But people have seen what's happened in the UK, where you've got police knocking at doors for social media posts, as an example. So there was a lot of pushback from the community against the hate speech laws that a lot of members of parliament were not expecting to happen, right? They thought this was kind of an insider issue. And so that's important to know, that I think people they have increased awareness of the threat that these things can pose to them and their lives. In terms of why are they doing it? Well, one was just simple politics, which is that they felt they needed to do something after Bondi, and this is what they had in the bottom drawer. Don't underestimate
it's really that simple. So you're not talking about highly sophisticated think tanks here. You're just thinking, let's do something, make it look like we're doing something.
That's definitely a part of it.
It got raced through in a day with a bill that no one had the time to read. It's astonishing.
Yeah, that's definitely a part of it. They both, for whatever reason, the Liberal Party also believed they needed to do something, which I thought was a mistake. But anyway, they, a big part of it was just we need to do something so people stop. People think we've done something about anti-Semitism and sectarian conflict. That's definitely a part of it. Another part is Labor has always wanted to do laws like this in some form. We saw the misinformation laws a couple of years ago that were proposed. Now, they were so toxic that not only did it not get voted down in the Senate, they didn't even put it to the Senate floor because they knew it was going to lose. So they absolutely, Labor, at a minimum, couldn't care less about freedom of speech. And so, yeah, I mean, if they have an opportunity to use situations, for example, Bondi, to forward that kind of approach, then they will do that. I'm not saying that that was the sole motivation, but given that it was going down that path, and you look at how expansive the powers are, yeah, I mean, there's been a desire to do something like this for a while, for sure.
Can you explain, Daniel, just the extent of the hate speech laws, what they cover for people who are just, I think 99.999% of the population have no idea what the hate speech laws are. They just don't like the sound of them. They feel like they're being censored. And it's that unease and lack of information and lack of understanding that's driving this response or justifying the response. Just give us a breakdown of what exactly they involve.
Yeah, so basically what was passed were laws that empower the Home Affairs Minister to designate certain groups as hate groups, and on that basis for them to be shut down or to have to cease operating. At a headline level, that's what it does. Now, there's a whole bunch of provisions in the laws that sort of define what this means. What is a hate crime, for example? Now, a hate crime is defined as activities that can threaten the health or safety of a certain cohort based on their race, religion, nationality, or ethnicity. There's a bunch of other definitions in there, but that's sort of the vaguest definition because health and safety doesn't mean physical. It can mean emotional or psychological health or safety, right? So that's the problem. It's just so broad and so subjective that basically anything, could be said to cause harm to someone's emotional well-being. Okay, so there's that side of it. So if the minister is satisfied that that's occurred, then they can be declared a hate group. Now, there's a bunch of provisions that I guess provide some what is claimed to be a safeguard. For example, the Director General of Security of ASIO has to confirm that view. So they have to believe that this is a hate crime, could be committed or has been committed. But interestingly, when you look at the provision around the Director General of ASIO, they basically have to be satisfied that there's an increase in risk of politically motivated violence that could occur as a result of this group. Now, a lot of people would hear that and go, well, okay, fair enough, we don't want politically motivated violence. But when you think about the words, so increased risk, right, that's a very low threshold. It could still be a very, very small risk, but it's a bigger risk now, right? So that's a low threshold. Then they say, okay, the existence of this group can increase the risk of politically motivated violence. Now, a lot of people would think that means that group is going to go out there and do bad things and hurt people. But that's not necessarily what it means. It just means that you could be a group that comes into existence and you could be, say, talking about immigration, talking about your concerns about other social issues, but there are other people in society that don't like you, and so they're going to be antagonized towards you. So your existence has caused an increase in the risk of politically motivated violence, but you're not the one perpetrating the violence. It's the other groups. Right, so the other groups can say, you're not allowed to march, and if you go march about whatever issue you're passionate about, we're going to come out and meet you there. The Director General of ASIO can say, well, hang on, this new group that's coming up is causing an increase in politically motivated violence, therefore they're not allowed to do that. Now, think about, this is not just a hypothetical scenario, so that would be victim blaming, right? We're not the ones doing it, but because we come into existence, we've antagonized other people. Yeah. Now, this has kind of already happened in a way when certain, if you want to call them conservative or sort of provocateurs have come to Australia. They do an event and the police have to go to the event because protesters are going to hurt they're threatening to cause damage. Yeah. But then who gets the bill?
Yeah.
So right? Candace Owens is a good example, I suppose, who was recently banned from coming to Australia. Right? And she became the world's #1 podcast in subsequent weeks. So Australia, in all its enlightenment, banned the world's leading #1 podcaster. I mean, how does that make for a modern nation? because we couldn't bear to listen to something that you can access on the internet in 5 seconds flat, less,
Well, you make a great point.
Thing though, Daniel, that's interesting because, say, I used to be in the theatre as a producer, trying to make a living as a producer, and then suddenly I've got to pay for police. Yeah, it's incredible. You just couldn't do it. It wouldn't be feasible. But
that's the point. Yeah, the point is to discourage people doing it, right? And this happened to Milo Yiannopoulos when he came. And I'm not a big fan of Milo, I've got to be honest with you. But I'm pretty sure it was in Melbourne. And I'm pretty sure either he or the event organisers got stuck with a bill because there was either police or extra security that they had to bring in. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. You should be sending the bill to the protesters, not to the people hosting the event peacefully. So, this is the issue, right?
Yeah, Bettina Arndt had to hire security for an event she held last year. I think it was about false allegations and how false allegations are basically destroying the any credibility the family law system had, and all the false allegations involved in domestic violence and so on and so forth. So that she had to hire extra security because one bunch of feminists took objection to it and attempted basically to close it down. She had to change venues and all sorts of nonsense. So would she, under this legislation, be potentially charged with hate speech laws for speaking out for men in a system which she perceives and many perceive as very anti-male? Would she be subject to hate speech laws?
So the laws that passed, so the original incarnation of the bill had specific things around hate speech and racial vilification. That was taken out. So what was passed wasn't sort of hate speech, it was the hate group side of it, which I know might sound like a distinction without a difference, but it's more about targeting the group. So if Bettina, in that particular example, I don't think an individual, who knows, right? Who knows how expansive these laws
are? Who knows? Nobody really knows. That's the point, isn't it?
Right. But on the face of it, probably if it's a part of a group or an organisation, then that would be an issue. If it's an individual speaking, it's less likely to be an issue. But again, the issue is the chilling effect. Right? If you don't know, you go, well, I'm just going to shut up and not say anything just in case.
So here's a concrete example. I wanted to interview Hizbut Tahrir, who I've done stories on over the years as a general news reporter, and who are a fascinating group and banned in much of the world, but not banned here. So I wanted to interview them when it came up that the government was planning to ban them. Suddenly their website's off. And would we have been subject, Cafe Lockdown, been subject to these laws if we'd gone ahead and interviewed Hizbut Tahrir, who are basically, and have done in the suburbs for decades, they advocate the overthrow of the government and the institution of theocracy, which is pretty much, they've been saying the same thing for decades. And if you go to one of their events or one of their community events, it's like a Presbyterian thing in the 50s, the families are all very clean cut, they're very friendly, the children are sweet, all of that. And and I don't think the general public knows anything about the Hizb. We've had front page headlines in the telly and so on and so forth. So how do these hate speech laws apply into that quagmire?
Yeah, I think there would be a risk in that case.
Do you?
Hizbut Tahrir itself as an organisation. So when you, a lot of those who voted for the bill said they voted for it because it was going to shut down and ban Hizbut Tahrir and also neo-Nazi organisations. But the legislation actually didn't do that, right? Because there was no organisation listed in the actual laws. So no organisation have been banned under that legislation, which is something that has maybe been missed in the public debate. The minister has the power to do it, right? The minister has the power. Maybe they will be banned, maybe they won't be banned. But as of right now, they're not banned, right? So the legislation had the worst of both worlds. If you're really concerned about Hizbut Tahrir and you think they should be banned, then just ban them, right? Or like they have done in the UK and elsewhere.
How can you ban them? It's a religion. My brother is my brother. They're actually well accepted within the Muslim community in Sydney. The Mufti has spoken out in support of them, if I've got that right. They hold their meetings perfectly publicly. There are the propaganda wing, if that's the wrong term, but the proselytizing wing of Islam, in a sense. I mean, they how can you ban them? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. Their ideas are very powerful. You should never underestimate them as a group. They're not a minority group in any way. They're not a fringe group. How can you ban them? It's like banning a fundamentalist Christian church like the Jehovah's Witnesses, all of whom are waiting for Christ to return and overthrow the human secular government. How does it work?
Well, I think you can ban the sort of. Well, I think you can ban the network of cells, is what they've done overseas in terms of when they're engaging in activities. If you're making the point about ideas, you're right. You can't ban an idea. And so this is one of the arguments about if you are a free speech absolutist and you go back to sort of Voltaire and some people like that, they would say, well, you can't actually ban someone from thinking something, right? And this is sort of one of the things that there's an interesting debate in Australia at the moment. You've also got some hate speech laws that are going through in Queensland as well as we speak. And the point that I have made is, well, you're not, the problem isn't so much what people, if you're concerned about what people are saying, I can understand that. But the real issue is not so much what people say, is they believe certain things. And so you can't sort of just ban, even if you believe banning the speech is the right way to go, you're probably not going to get the outcome that you want from doing that, because people will still believe those things and they'll probably still find ways of communicating with one another anyway. Like you said about Candace Owens, well, you don't want her to come here, fine, but you can't ban the internet, right? You still, people, and people are going to be interested, right? It's like, who is this Candace Owens person? What's she saying that's so controversial? I'm going to go look her up. And like you say, now she's number one. So you've always got to think through how this might actually play out in reality.
Can we move, let's have a laugh now and then move to this next conversation. This is a new Victorian number plate called, and the thing is, how is Dan Andrews walking around not in jail? How is Victoria still holding together? It's just a basket case. Everyone, all I meet now, well, you've left Victoria. All I meet now is people who've left Victoria, like Victorian refugees. How are they still, the Labor Party still in power there, still going, when there's just one scandal after another? From the machete bins to now this $15 billion hole that's gone to bikie gangs, apparently. How are they surviving?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, for a long time, the media sort of provided favourable coverage, certainly in lockdowns as an example. There was no one. I mean, there were some very important individuals, even within the mainstream media, who did speak out against it. But as institutions, the media gave complete coverage to what was happening. So they got away with it because there was no debate. I think also the Liberal Party has often been unwilling to take a stand because they would. And like, for sure, if you took a stand against the lockdowns early on, it would have been unpopular, because the lockdowns were popular to begin with. That doesn't mean that you just go with the flow, though. So they were unwilling to stand up and engage in debate. I think that's a part of it. When you look at it now, though, I think the primary vote of Labor is down about 29, right, which is insane. One Nation is almost level with them. The Liberal Party, I think, is a bit above 30 in Victoria. So it's a very divided community. But I think Victorians are absolutely over the current government. It's just a question of whether or not they think that the Liberal Party is the party that's going to be able to govern properly in its own right. That's the main question. So one of the reasons you're seeing a lot of people say I'm voting for a minor party is because they don't want to vote Labor, and they're going, I'm not sure about Liberals either yet, so I'm going to park my vote with a minor party. The question is how much of that will go back to the majors as we get closer to November election.
Well, they had a party there called Hate Dan Andrews Party. And I put that down. I had to leave Victoria, was doing a job. I thought I'll put that one down. And that was actually went straight to Dan Andrews. It was actually a vote for him. And I thought, how can they get away with this? It's the corruption seems to be the corruption. It's like the Sopranos is running the state. That's how people are perceiving it. You know what I mean? It's just nuts. And even the more truth that comes out, it's interesting about the popularity of the lockdowns. It really, I suppose, it depends what you think. I mean, some of those marches, one of the big marches in Melbourne had 400,000 people in it, and Sky News reported that. So you got 400,000 people. I was a speaker at that one, I mean, basically from Parliament House right the way to Flagstaff Gardens, it was wall to wall people, and we were doing the speeches in Flagstaff Gardens, and people hadn't even left Parliament House. And then we went back. Now, politicians know that for every one person that turns up at a rally, 10 people want to go and they don't. So that's an awful lot of people at this rally, and it was just dismissed like, oh, we don't even know what they're talking about. Then we went to Canberra, where there was the biggest protest in Canberra history with the we call it the Convoy to Canberra, and the police commissioner came out and said there was only 6 to 10,000 people there, when all the footage and ABC has ever come out and said it's the biggest. So there's just lies and lies and lies and lies. This is what people are seeing out here, and Victoria seems to be like just basically swamped in a tsunami of bullshit, and people can't make sense of how the most livable, because I love Victoria, that's where I made my living, how this incredibly wonderful state has become a basket case, and yet they still want to build a statue to Dan Andrews, you know.
Yeah.
Hopefully
I think by the end of the lockdowns they were unpopular, but certainly in 2020 people were supporting them. I'd agree with that. Yeah. I mean, that was the sad reality at the time, and I understand why people supported it. I mean, there was fear. I totally get it. I don't blame people for feeling that way. I totally get it. But when you're inundated with this fear, I understand why people felt that way. I just had a different opinion. But yeah, I mean, early on it was popular, and at a minimum, people were scared. Even if they had a different view, they were too scared. And because we were isolated, right, no one was able to actually have conversations about. I mean, you can talk online, but it's a bit different. No one's having barbecues where you're able to share a different opinion. So yeah, I mean, early on they were popular. As I say, I mean, that protest you're referencing, I think, was the breaking point where government realised that if they keep pushing this, there's going to be some serious civil unrest, and so that's why I say that the one I guess positive is that we got out of it, and we did get out of it because people finally had enough and took to the streets. So yeah, that's a
lot of people feel that we haven't got out of it though. It's just sort of we haven't. There's a thing that's been posted. I saw it yesterday. It's had millions of views, and it says 2019 was like the last year where everything seemed normal. And since then, it seems like we're just in a crazy Netflix series where there's just one thing. You wake up in the morning, oh, there's something else, there's something else, there's something else. And all craziness is going around where, I mean, even the EU coming out now backing that a woman, any one of us can decide to be, any one of us can decide to be a woman. And so basically we are a woman and it's forced onto us. What's the difference between that and George Orwell's 1984, where he said freedom is the right to say 2 + 2 = 4, and now the state is coming to say 2 + 2 = a man can be a woman or anything else that we tell you that it equals. I mean, to me, it's like we've basically been taught what to think now, what reality is. The government has gone from fixing the roads and cleaning the bins to a point now where I interviewed a man in Port Lincoln who works in a service station. And he said this most profound thing in the interview. He said, when did loving your country become a thought crime?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying in terms of I mean, there has been a structural change since COVID in many different ways. So I can see that. In terms of some of the other things there, look, I actually am probably a little bit more of the view that people have seen through a lot of this. I think we have gotten through the peak of this gender ideology. Yes, there are still many institutions pushing it, schools, for example, and elsewhere. I accept that. But the public is over it, and the public feels a lot safer in speaking out against it. Same as climate, the sort of the paranoia around climate change. People are over that. I mean, even the government doesn't label people climate deniers anymore, right?
Oh, wow, that's interesting. They stopped that.
I haven't heard. Yeah, I mean, I used to get it all the time.
Well, they don't use global warming anymore. That's gone because the globe's not warming, so that's a problem with that statement.
That's it. So, look, I think that we've actually broken the back of some of this paranoia. Some of it is a social contagion that happens that people jump on board. Same with the ESG, environmental sustainability and governance. That's tapered off from some corporations, and some of the DEI stuff like it's still there. Don't get me wrong. Like there's a lot of corporations that won't promote men, as an example. I'm not saying it's not an issue, but I don't think it's as bad as it was a few years ago.
No,
so
it's definitely changing.
Yeah, so
Charlie Kirk heralded the end of it. Once they, I think that's where people thought enough's enough.
Yeah. I mean, that was a big part of it. So I sort of have a bit of hope that as bad as things have been, I do think people got to the right view on COVID and the lockdowns, that it was bad. People have sort of got to the view that this gender ideology has gone too far, that the global warming stuff is a hoax in terms of the economics of it. And, you just look at hydrogen and, it's just a made up thing. No commercial viability among other factors. So, I mean, I think it's worrying that it got that bad, but I also think that we still have enough freedom that people are able to communicate and we are able to get to the truth on a lot of these things. So I'm probably a bit cautiously optimistic on where we're going on some of those things.
How do you think this will play out on the future of Australian politics? Is One Nation got the infrastructure and the financial backing to actually become the leading opposition party and then the leading party of government? Is that a feasible possibility? On current trends, they're going to be the most popular party, if nothing else.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the next, set of polling that comes out in a couple of weeks could have them above Labor on primary. That's certainly possible. Look, yes, they could become the dominant centre-right party. That won't happen this term of Parliament. It will take a while to do that. And the main challenge for any party coming through is you might do well in the polling, but you've got to win seats in Parliament, and it's very difficult to achieve that. And so I think One Nation at this point will likely get a bunch of senators. But in terms of winning lower house seats, I don't see that happening in a large
they don't have the infrastructure on the ground, because they don't have the candidates to stand. Is that the major flaw?
Yeah, look, a part of it is not just the candidates, but it's actually having volunteers and things to help on the ground. So like brass knuckles politics is you've got to put the call flutes up, you have to have your how to vote cards, you need to have people door knocking and letterboxing, like all of this stuff. Even though we live in a digital age, you've got to do those things. And so it's hard. One of Nigel Farage's greatest accomplishments is getting an actual party together that has candidates running at local councils and keeping the ship together. Is unbelievable what he's done with that. Just doing it, even if he fails, even just getting as far as he has gotten is an amazing accomplishment that unless you've kind of seen the inside of how the sausage is made, it's hard to understand what a feat that is. But it takes a long time to do. So I think that One Nation may get to that point, but it is not going to happen. Like their polling might be 35%, right? But they may only win 3 seats. Right, because of our voting system, right? So that's you've got to remember that.
Cause unrest as well, because if everyone feels they voted for them,
they got cheated,
and they didn't get anywhere, they're going to feel cheated, and they're going to feel that the system's corrupt, even if it's not. That's how they're going to feel. Can we just to finish? The other big thing is we're in economic trouble, and yet we're sitting on all this mineral wealth, and the gas thing going off. I know they're all talking about it everywhere. But how's that going to change? Is there any way? Because there was an accountant reached out to me somewhere, and he said he's done the figures since John Howard apparently started it, giving the gas away cheaply. He reckons it's equivalent. We've lost about $1 trillion in lost revenue, and that's what Australia owes. I mean, at the moment, our generation, even your generation, is going to leave your children $1 trillion worth of debt, and yet we're sitting on the money. It's right beneath our feet. So do you see that changing at all in politics, that they might actually go, look, let's renegotiate these deals?
Yeah. Well, I think with the gas thing, I think the point was we could export the gas if you're going back 20 years because we used coal, right? So it was fine. The problem is that we've said you're not allowed to use coal anymore. And it's the same with the nuclear thing. Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons we don't have nuclear power is we didn't need it, right? Because we had coal. One of the reasons France has so much nuclear is they don't have the coal. And so, if you go back 20 years, I don't quite know when this accountant is saying this happened, but if you do go back to the Howard era, most of our energy, the lion's share of our energy came from coal, and everyone was okay with it. It was sort of this climate change crusade that said that coal is bad. So then we had to use more gas. But all of these companies have already negotiated deals to export their gas, right? And so there's a good argument that you shouldn't just say break a contract. So there was, again, with so many things with government, there's no forward thinking. It's like, okay, if you say you can't use coal, then what are we going to use? And then they go, oh, all these companies are exporting gas. Well, okay, maybe we can have a gas reservation policy like they have in Western Australia. I don't disagree with that, but you're not going to be able to do that tomorrow. Right? This is a pretty significant piece of infrastructure that needs to be set up. So, yeah, I think the fundamental problem is that the political class basically said, well, you're not allowed to use coal because it's causing global warming. And then, we've ended up in this mess. So that's basically my assessment of how it came about.
Thanks. It really is a mess. So just a couple of final questions. It really is a mess, isn't it? If you were advising the government on immigration policy and the lack of social cohesion and the tensions that it's driving in the Australian community, and the fact that 70% of the population are against it, what would you advise? How to proceed?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, one is you just have to reduce the numbers pretty dramatically straight away. So that would be step one. I think you have to have a genuine way of vetting people who are coming in, which is difficult, right? I mean, there's no easy way we talk about having a values test, and that's fine. But I think what the Liberal Party has been talking about is designating certain countries as high risk and either, having more detailed screening or limitations on how they can come in. The other thing is you've got to get real about deporting people that are doing the wrong thing. There are a lot of people that come here do the right thing. There's no doubt about it. And by the way, I don't blame the migrants for coming here because why wouldn't you want to come here? Of course you would. The fault is with the policy that hasn't worked. So I think you've got to just be willing to have a hardline stance on if you're going to engage in sort of some of the behaviour that we've seen. You're just not welcome in this country. There's plenty of other decent people that can come here instead. There's also, I really think one of the biggest issues is the university system. It's basically become, a backdoor mechanism for people gaining permanent residency under the guise of student visas. And I'm also concerned that a lot of them are maybe not being exploited as such, but they sort of have these circumstances where they're sort of under the thumb of the universities or whoever's sponsoring their visa. And so I'm actually feel, as a country, we're a bit guilty of allowing that to happen as well. So
I like the slave cast. I mean, let's be honest. You get them in on these visas. I remember in the trams, they had a cleaner at the trams. He'd turn up at 6 or 7 in the morning. He'd be there till 11 o'clock at night. He was getting $10 an hour, and he did that for 2 years. And he was on a student visa, so every 2 days a week he had to go do a course. And his girlfriend worked in nursing homes, and she also was on sort of slave wages under the thing that if she got through this course, she would get permanent residency. And so they're kind of like a slave class, the Uber Eats, this is how it's changing a bit now, but this is how it is. There's a lot of people making a lot of money off the back of these students as well.
Yeah, I've heard anecdotal things of that effect as well, where they're working below minimum wage and so forth. And
they can't speak about it because they're sent straight back. So it's basically
they go back.
Shut up.
Yeah, I think it's terrible, what's happening to a lot of them as well. I mean, I feel for the students who probably come in under false pretenses. How many of them, so I think that there is a scandal brewing in this space. I wouldn't be surprised if some things come out about it. And I just think the whole sector needs to be cleaned up. I don't have a problem with, we've had foreign students forever, right? It's not a problem having some, but like the University of Sydney, 50% of their students are from overseas.
Yeah.
But it's just crazy. It's out of control. So that's got to be pulled in.
Yeah. The only final question I have, since we're talking about all the crap, is the NDIS scheme, which is seems to be a major employer of people now. And what are your thoughts on that? Because it doesn't seem to make sense from where we're seeing. We're seeing people getting paid $3,000 a weekend just to have some young autistic man who's almost basically semi-independent just hanging around their house to give their parents some respite. There seems to be a huge amount of money coming into it. where's that money coming from? I guess it's the taxpayers' money, but what's your thoughts on the NDIS scheme?
Yeah, it is taxpayers' money. Look, the problem with the NDIS is it was originally set up for people with, I forget the exact terms they used, but it was something like profound and catastrophic disabilities. And I think that's fair enough, right? I mean, if you've had a catastrophic car accident or something like that, and you basically need care for your whole life, I think most people would say, well, because you can't really get insurance, private insurance to cover you, maybe you can't afford the private insurance. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a genuine role for government. But it's just like with so many government programs, it has just grown out of control. And it's become one of these things now that is so politically difficult to cut if you wanted to cut it, because there's a large cohort of people that depend upon it, right? And so this is one of the great issues we've had. Voters, yeah. So there's a big sectoral shift from the market to the non-market sector in terms of where people are employed, not just NDIS, but government or government-adjacent jobs. Mm-hmm. And so trying to communicate to the public that, well, like you said, we've got $1 trillion in debt, we're going to have to do something about it. And they say, yeah, I agree, but I don't want you taking my which is understandable, right? I get it. Mm. But this is why we need real leadership. You know, you're going to have to take people on a journey to communicate that, well, you know, this is actually becoming a big national, a big national challenge for us, and we're going to have to address it.
You're talking about a vision, about someone actually coming out, a leader with a vision of where we could reach as a country, because we haven't had that for a long time.
So if you were Prime Minister, Daniel, and you were the leader, what would you do? Would you abolish the hate laws immediately? Would you drastically cut immigration back to the sort of Tony Abbott 70,000 sort of level? And what other changes would you make to encourage people to be happy, healthy and productive, rather than you go to any shopping mall, you're walking within a defeated population. People look defeated. They're scruffily dressed. They're overweight. They, it feels so much that the Australian population, or the indigenous, the native, the Australian-born population has been defeated. That's how it feels.
Mm. Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, certainly, I'd want to get rid of the hate speech laws, for sure. Cutting immigration back down to sensible levels would be a big part of it. I also think there's something that is important is around what I would call family choice. And what I mean by that is in relation to raising of children. In our society, basically we used to have extended families that would sort of help out with raising kids. Now, sometimes that was, depending on how you got on with your extended family, that may have been good, that may have been not so good. But basically now it's mum and dad both need to work, and so they've got to put their kids in childcare. And there is absolutely a role for childcare in the childcare centres. We've heard a lot of scandals that have come out about sexual abuse and violence, and I suspect, sadly, that's the tip of the iceberg. And I think that one of the reasons is everyone is under the pump all the time, and children are the ones who miss out because we're distracted by everything else. So I think policies that basically, for example, there's a policy of income tax splitting, which sounds technical, but it just means you and your partner can pool your income together so you'd have an overall lower tax rate. Also things like with the current childcare system, the funding goes straight to the childcare facility rather than to the parent, right? So I just think that wouldn't it be better if we're going to spend all that money, wouldn't it just be better if the family's got the support? And then if you want to keep sending your child to the current situation, you can do that. But maybe you want to do other things with that money. Maybe you want to stay home for longer, whatever it is. I think that would really help alleviate the time and financial pressure that is leading to these decisions being taken. So that's that's something that I'm fairly passionate about as well, because I've got young kids and I can see. We're in a good, very fortunate position with our work and so forth, but I can see a lot of our friends and they just the struggles. So I think that's a really big one for our country.
Well, the children need hope. The child, if you're saying, look, I need you to go out and work hard for 10 years, but you'll be able to afford a house after that. Maybe, even a house and rental. Now, they're saying we could work hard all our lives, even get a university degree, do really well, and we might be renting all our lives. So where's the incentive for them to drive hard? And then the above generation looks down and goes, you've got no respect, you've got no work ethic, as they're driving around in these huge $250,000 caravans pulled by a $250,000 four-wheel drive because, basically they've harvested the last 40 years of abundance and left the next generation with the bill. And I say this to young people all the time. This really works. I say you were 20. I go, okay, you're going out on your first date, your first big date. You've met a girl and you're really taken with her and you really want to show her off. So you go to a good restaurant, you sit down, and the waiter comes up and says, before you look at the menu, you might go to the back pages. There's a bargain selection of meals, because the people that sat here before you, they dined out, but they haven't managed to pay all the bill. They didn't have enough money to pay all the bill. So I'm going to have to get you to pay their bill and then order. Would you do that? And they look at you for a second and they know it's a loaded question. And they go, well, no, of course I wouldn't do that. I go, well, why are you paying the national debt? And it hits them like a brick. It just, we have a thing where no one actually stops enough to think, but it really hits them with a brick. But that's what we're actually saying to the next generation. Look at all we did. Look at all we did. All this natural wealth. And here we've got all this huge amount of $1 trillion, and good luck paying that off. And then you can have a life after that. I mean, that's what we're actually doing. And because on your website, it says leaving a better Australia or something to the next generation. But at the moment, we are not doing that at all.
Yeah, and it's not just the economics, right? It's also the culture. I mean, what kind of society are they growing up in? And, again, I'm very, I guess I try to be very empathetic with often when some in the younger generation might have views that I don't agree with. But then we've got to remind ourselves that they've come through a set of very broken and corrupt institutions. I mean,
that's right.
It used to be the case that basically you could send your children to any kind of school. And yes, there was different quality, but you could sort of go, well, they're probably going to get the basics. They're probably going to get enough to get ahead, and they're not going to be indoctrinated with all this abstruse ideology. But that's also not the case now either, right? Yeah. So there's not only economics, but it's like, well, they don't trust anything, right? They don't trust institutions, and I understand why. So, and then, they get blamed. You're not working hard enough. And,
that's what they get. So, they get disrespected,
And we can talk for another hour about this.
Anyway, it's great to have you on. Thank you for
it's been great.
Daniel.
We've been talking with Daniel Wild, who's the Deputy Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs and one of Australia's leading political commentators and social commentators. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and we hope to have you on again. Thank you so much, Daniel.
All right, thank you, and have a safe trip across the Nullarbor.
Yeah, that's where I live now. So it's...
When I met Jesus Christ, he was almost 10 years old. And he was helping his mother push a trolley full of all they owned. And because they couldn't find an inn they could get in, they were heading to the city and leaving Bethlehem. Couldn't you perform a miracle? I'm out of them, he said. Tried turning nothing into one, but it just made my mother cry. It just made my mother cry. Mary Magdalene has become a man, and tonight he's old, and she has been riding my tram. Now it's late and she's trying to sleep beneath a poster for a bank. Your dreams are important quite sure. So head down, we just keep running along our fading golden shores. So head down, we just keep running along our fading golden shores. Come give us your